In a previous release of Adagio GridView, the hyperlink feature allowed you to make a hyperlink to email addresses or websites so that you can click on the cell and launch. This release now allows hyperlinks to go towards documents that are stored in your system so that you can launch those as well, as long as a Windows program has been applied to that document type. For example, to see how this works, let's take a look at a fairly simple example that has JPEG images linked to items in this case. Here we have items that are stored in a particular directory and have a file name that includes the item number. If we take a look at the formula used in the calculated column, you'll see that it uses a new formula called full file name that has a couple of parameters. The first is the information that will be displayed in the cell, in which case it's the item number field. And the rest is a number of strings concatenated together in order to build the path and the file name of the file that you want to link to. When using the full file name function, you'll see that the less than and greater than signs need to be used to surround the path and file name. To make this interesting, you'll want to have a database field as part of the file name so that particular files can be linked to based on the information stored on the record. If you want to be able to see if the file exists first before you link, there is another new feature called File Exists that will also check for the existence of a file, 0 meaning false and 1 meaning true. So here we have a file that does have an existence, so if I single click on that, it will launch, in this case, the Windows Photo Viewer to launch the JPEG. Another example of a document you might want to load are PDFs for printed invoices or statements. Here, we're taking advantage of the PDFs that can automatically be generated out of order entry if you choose to save archive customer copies. That's a setting in the order entry company profile. You'll see that these particular documents have a standard naming convention, which involves the invoice number and the customer number, and also the source of where the document came from, and lots of underscores instead of spaces in the file name. So in order to build the path, you can also choose to add a formula that says if the file exists, then show something, otherwise show a blank. And this way it's a little bit more obvious to see whether or not the file exists to click on. So you can see that the particular file name is getting built based on how the standard naming convention of the PDFs work. In order to build this, because the underscores are in the file name rather than spaces, this particular view takes advantage of taking the order key, which is the invoice number, and all the spaces in between, and converting the spaces to underscores. It counts all of the spaces and turns them into underscores. So if we want to load a particular document, we can just click this and it will launch the Adobe Reader in order to view the invoice. In previous releases of Adagio GridView, in order to see subtotals of numeric columns, you had to use either a summary filter or simply set a set sort order on one or more columns and use the summarize feature to see each row summarized with subtotals. You could double click and drill down, or you could multi-select multiple columns or even all of them and use the expand all in order to see all of the details and subtotals. This release now allows you to set up the information with details and subtotals automatically, including page breaks between, using a new feature called Report Format. You can see this on Filters. In order to set this up, you first need to create sort sequences. That allows you to set the way that the grid is sorted by one or more columns. The next step is to create the filter. In addition to selecting the records for your inquiry, you set the sort sequence for the way that you want to sort your grid. When you enable a sort sequence, this activates the new feature Format Report. Format Report will show the details and subtotals based on the primary field of the sort sequence. And it will include page breaks after each subtotal, so each group can be printed on separate pages. Let's see how this works. I'll now select from the filter drop-down the subtotal by item. And as I scroll, you can see that the subtotal shows with the page break. And as I scroll down the list, you can see that each section of items and a subtotal appear. If I choose to preview, then you can see the information for the particular item group on the page. And as we scroll through the list, you can see all the different items. If I wanted to do subtotaling by a different field, I could just create a different filter with a different sort sequence. And now I've got groupings by, in this case, customer, or by salesperson, or whatever you require. When you send this to Excel, then the page layout, including the page breaks, are maintained. Also, other print properties such as portrait or landscape, or if you want to use the page setup to use scaling, let's say you want to fit all the columns to one page wide. When I send this information to Excel, then the information for the page layout will be shown. You can see all the subtotals there. And if I go to the print screen, you can see that the information is scaled one page wide. You can see that the scaling property has been set here, and all the different information on separate pages. This release includes a number of new functions that makes it easier to work with date ranges, including those that are determined from specification codes in the Adagio Financial Reporter. Using an example date of December 31st, 2007 as a run date to match up with sample data, two of these new functions allows you to determine the starting and ending dates of a Financial Reporter spec code. In this example, I've chosen the year-to-date code of Y to use the date start for the beginning and date end for the end. These are based on the run date that you log in. So if I were to choose the run date of something different, say August 31st, and refresh the view, then these dates will now be automatically recalculated based on your run date. If you're not quite sure which code to use to grab your date range, just access the Financial Reporter and look at the View Account Data in order to see the list of codes. If your fiscal calendar isn't from January to December, you can use this function, either date start or date end, and add a second parameter, F, in order to base the results on the fiscal calendar. To check to see if a transaction date falls within a specified range of your choosing, and then also output some value if the result of that check is true, there are two new functions that hopefully will make that easier. The first is called DateIn, which will do the searching of the date in between a certain range of your choosing. Also, another function called IncludeAmount will output some database value if the date falls within a date range of your choosing. If we were to scroll down the list, there's some here, that in this case the transaction date falls within the date range specified, so therefore the value is true, and then it will output the amount. You can include these with filters as well, so if we want to check within a particular set of date ranges, that will select all of the transactions where the dates match and output the amounts. These particular DateIn IncludeAmounts in this example happens to use a specified date range. But you can also use the financial spec codes as well. So another example of using DateIn with the M, or current month, spec code, and also the amount. So if I were to select a particular current month and refresh that, now we can see that the match is based on the current month, in which case is August.